Hi everybody, Melinda Brown here. We're going to go over questions 58 through 66 today, and we're getting near the end. There are 100 questions that you have to know the answers to. I might go over the fact that when you go for your test, they will give you 10 questions. You have to answer 6 of them correctly, and they will be out of the 100 questions that we are learning. Once you've answered 6 correctly, they will stop. So if you answer the first 6 correctly, then you're finished. But if you miss one of them, they'll keep going and give you a total of 10. And if you've answered 6 of those correct, then you have passed the test. So once again, I'd like to thank the Rogers County Literacy Council, the Oklahoma Department of Libraries, and the Institute for Museum and Library Services for funding these classes. Today we're going to talk about American history. Up until now, we've been learning things about our present government, our present leaders, but now we're going to go back and talk about how this country came to be. So there are 2 words, 2 vocabulary words that I want to be sure that you're clear on. Colonies and colonists. When the people came to America, they formed groups or little towns. Those towns or little groups were called colonies, and there were 13 of them. So that's what that is, colonies, groups or towns of people, 13 colonies. The people that lived in those colonies were called colonists. And the questions that we will cover today often just use the word colonies or colonist. So you need to be sure to know those words and what they mean, because when you're asked the question, and remember the questions are oral, out loud, they'll use these words and you need to know what those words mean so that you understand the question. So colonies are the 13 places that the new Americans lived. Colonist is another description of the people that came to America. So, why did they travel so far? That's what our questions today are about. So to start out with, and you're going to really like this high-tech learning tool that I have here. Starting out, where did the first Americans come from? Well, they came from all over the world, but mainly from Western Europe, which are the countries of England, France, Spain, Germany. And the one I have painted in red here is Britain. Britain is also called England or Great Britain. The king in Great Britain sent out people to form colonies in America. He said, I want you people to go there and form your towns and your cities, but still be part of England. You'll just be England, but you'll live in America. So how did they get to America? This is the part I think you're really going to like. They had to travel in ships across the Atlantic Ocean. You'll see my really high-tech tool here. So they had to go from Europe clear across the Atlantic Ocean in ships, which took a few months, usually 2 or 3 months, to go from Britain to America. And then when they got to America, once again, they formed little towns and groups, 13 of them, which were called colonies, on the eastern side of the United States. So, if you put that all together, whoops, looks like my ship's about to sink here. Okay. They start out in Britain or Europe. They cross the Atlantic Ocean, pretty bumpy ride. And they end up on the eastern seacoast of America. Okay? And remember, those first people that came here were called the colonists. Okay. So they came here for reasons. It wasn't going to be an easy job to be in a boat for several months, and a lot of people died coming over. So why would they take that dangerous trip to come to America? Had to be some pretty good reasons. The question is, why did the people, the colonists, come to America? They came for freedom, for political liberty, and remember, liberty means freedom, religious freedom, economic opportunity, remember life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They wanted to be able to do and live their life by making a living however they chose. They wanted to be able to practice their own religion. You may remember that the king had his own church and he wanted everybody to go there. So many people wanted to get away from that where they could practice their own religion. It goes with this one, religious freedom. And they wanted to escape persecution. Maybe if they didn't go to the king's church or for some other reason, people wouldn't associate with them. Maybe they were asked to pay higher taxes. Maybe they were treated badly, tortured, put in jail. So these are all reasons that people wanted to leave Britain or a lot of the countries in Europe. So the answer, why did colonists come to America? You can just answer freedom. That would be a good answer. But if you remember any of these others and you want to answer one of those are fine also and very good. But you can see all of these are attached to this word, freedom. So when the colonists got here, who did they meet? Who was living in America? And of course you remember that the people that the colonists met were the American Indians, or you can call them Native Americans. There's a later question that asks for you to name one or two of the American Indian or Native American tribes. So we'll talk about that too. Now, part of our history that's very sad part, but true, so we need to know about it, is that in America's first years, the Americans had slaves. And the question is, from what country did the slaves come? And the answer is, they came from Africa or they were Africans. So a really sad part of our American history is that we had slaves and they were Africans or from Africa. So eventually the young Americans, the colonists, were building their own houses, growing their own food, doing everything for themselves. Britain was not helping them, and eventually Britain even asked them to send extra taxes and extra money to England, and the Americans said, no, we're not going to do that. We're living our own life here. We're making our way on our own, so we want to be free and be our own country. We do not want to send money to the king. We do not want to have extra rules of the king while we live here in America. We want to be our own country. So the question on this one is, why did the colonists fight the British? And believe me, the king wasn't happy about this. He sent soldiers to America to fight the Americans and to tell them that they had to do what the king said. So one of the answers could be that the Americans didn't want to pay the high taxes. Another one was the British Army was living in their houses, and they didn't have any choice about this. The Army would come to the door and say, we're going to live here, and by the way, you're going to feed us as well. And they didn't like that. They had no self-government. No self-government. So the answer on this one is any of these three, whichever one you remember. Of course, it always sometimes boils down to a money thing. So high taxes might be the easiest one to remember. But I certainly wouldn't want somebody coming to my house and saying you have no choice. I'm going to live here and you're going to feed me. And you want to be able to have your own government. Your own government. So, a letter was written to the king that said the Americans were no longer going to be British citizens, that they were going to be their own country, and that they were no longer going to pay the taxes. And of course, that started a war. But the letter that was written to the king telling him that the Americans wanted to be free is called the Declaration of Independence. And of course, one of the questions is, who wrote the Declaration of Independence? And Thomas Jefferson is the answer to that question. And here's his signature. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. He was later an American president. Then another question asks, when was the Declaration of Independence sent to the king? When did the American people say, yes, we want to send this to the king? And the year is 1776. And here's the Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson wrote with the signatures of all the founding fathers that got together and said, we want to be a free country. And of course, I don't think you can see it. Maybe you can. The date on this is July 4th, 1776. So that's why we have our 4th of July celebration. It's our Independence Day. If you speak Spanish, I think we've discussed that declaration. There's a Spanish word that's almost exactly the same, which means to declare, and another Spanish word that's almost like independence, which means to be free. So Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence in 1776, telling the king that Americans declared that they were a free country. Now, we talked about this a little bit already, about where the 13 colonies are on the eastern seaboard here. Here's the Atlantic Ocean. And there is one question that asks you, what is the ocean on the eastern seaboard, on the eastern side of the United States of America? And it is the Atlantic Ocean. This is where the people first came on that boat. They landed here on this seacoast, and they made 13 different towns or groups. And those were the original 13 colonies. This is kind of a close-up of the area where the 13 colonies were. Then there's a question that says, name 3 of the 13 original colonies. Most of my students remember the ones that have the word new in them: New York, New Jersey, and New Hampshire. New York, New Jersey, and New Hampshire. But you might know somebody who lives in one of the eastern states that was originally a colony. So if you know somebody that lives in one of the original 13 colonies that became states, then you can answer any of them. But most of my students say New York, New Jersey, and New Hampshire. Okay, so then that was in 1776. the Americans fought a very harsh and deadly war with the British. And in 1787, the Founding Fathers got together and had a constitutional convention. Okay, a convention is where you get together. Constitutional kind of gives it away. They were going to write the Constitution. And one of the questions is, what happened at the Constitutional Convention? Should be a really easy one because the words tell you what happened. The Constitution was written. Okay, so here's the Constitution. And it's the one that starts with "We the people." We the people, and it gives all the rules of how we're going to set up our government. Remember, the Constitution tells us how our government is set up. And it was written in 1787, which is 11 years after the Declaration of Independence. So, 1787. One of the questions is, when was the Constitution written and agreed on by the people in America? The answer is 1787. And another question is, what are the first three words of the Constitution? And that's "We the people." So we've gone through almost 70 of the questions. The next few sets are also about American history, so we'll start with those next time. And just for a little extra patriotism, I wanted to say goodbye to you with these special glasses. Thank you very much. I hope you're learning. I know you are. See you next time. Bye-bye.